We are live, Catherine. Woohoo! Woohoo!
Yay!
Yes, thank you so much for joining me, Catherine.
Of course, my pleasure.
Yeah, so what I like to do first is explain what the 90 means. Because everyone says, what does 90 mean? Behind the 90 means. So basically, whenever I
Yeah,
counsel couples, I say 90% of what you go through in life is about your past, which is our stories. Only 10% is about the here and now. And so often we
I
focus so
love
much
that.
on that 10%, right? Which is, oh, we have poor communication. Well, yeah, you
Yeah,
may have poor communication, but there's something else tied to that poor communication, whether it's family history, experiences. So it's something more. And so that 90% represents a person's story. And so often we hang out in the 10% and we don't solve any problems because we're just
yeah.
hanging out in the symptom versus problem area. So I want to say welcome. I'm so happy to have you here. Catherine, we have been knowing each other for a very long time.
We
And
have way
yes,
longer than I thought since the last time we talked about this.
yes, yes. And so I am honored to call you a friend. I'm honored to call you a colleague, and so all those great things. And so I'm so happy to have you here today. You are an
Oh,
amazing therapist, and so I want you to express to the audience like what is your specialty?
well, my specialty. We were just talking about this. So my specialty, it's hard for me to say exactly because I feel like I do so much across the board from anxiety and depression. But I think I've gravitated more toward in recent years has been relationships, helping people work
Mhm.
through them. Um, and obviously the topic of this conversation, how to avoid divorce if they end up in divorce, how to move through that as positively as possible.
Yeah.
um, but I mean, initially I started off with teenagers. I was in the school district, and I worked with at-risk teens, and that was because I
Wow.
worked with teens for so long. That's how I started.
Okay.
So kids with all kinds of issues.
So what made you pivot? You know, you're the school counselor, and this setting is it's really what you said is a big difference.
Yeah, oh, huge difference. And
Okay.
honestly, I was a teacher for a long time, for about 15 years, and then I went into counseling because I knew with it honestly, before I even went into teaching, I knew I wanted to be a therapist. I had considered it and talked about it. So when I went into
Mhm.
that field, immediately I didn't become a what you would consider a regular school counselor. I worked specifically, I was the at-risk counselor.
Okay.
So I was with the kids, and I was always, I mean, honestly, I was always good with that as a teacher. I can say that about myself, working with
Sure.
kids that had issues. Like I had principals would come to me back in the day.
Mhm.
Other teachers couldn't handle. They're like, you know what, we're going to give you to Miss Ryan, and they would say, hey, can I know I'm overloading your class, but can you take this kid? I know you'll do well with them. And I'm like,
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah.
So I think that's kind of how I got to get into that. But when it came down to it, that position, this at risk position, was dissolving.
Mhm.
And I knew I didn't want to be a regular school counselor. I didn't want to have my days mostly focused around testing and making kids' schedules and being college ready, which is super important. But it's
Yeah.
just not what I wanted to do.
Okay.
And
Well, so
that's,
here we are. So here we are. You are working in private practice. You're, seeing clients and helping them out in their relationships. When you think about it, everything is about a relationship.
yes.
Everything is about a relationship. You really can't get around it. It's like most of the disturbance that we experience in life is due to a relationship or the lack thereof. Everything is about a relationship.
Yeah,
When you think about the
you're right.
people who have depression and anxiety, it's usually as a result of a failed relationship, a poor relationship with themselves or with others, family members, boyfriends, girlfriends. It's
Yep.
usually as a result of that. And if you don't have those things in place, your mental health can suffer, relationships suffer, and it's important to have those tools. So today, for those of you just
That,
joining us, we are talking about when love is not enough. Because sometimes we feel like if I love someone, that should be enough. But when you think about the phases of a relationship, can
mhm.
you explain the phases of a relationship?
Yes, I can. And as I said, I was just talking about this earlier with a client. I'm still in my office. Um,
Beautiful artists.
just thank you. But honestly, just earlier today, I was going over this with one of my clients who was struggling in a relationship. And, you know, everyone knows the beginning relationship, that honeymoon. Everyone's heard this phrase, the honeymoon phase of a relationship, and that is the butterflies, the excitement is like, oh, he texted. Before it used to be called. Now it's like, oh, he texted, or he
Yep.
DM'd me, whatever it is.
Uh-huh.
And that's that honeymoon phase, and then we get into that moves from the realization phase. That's when we start. That's usually private. It's when you start privately distressing certain things, and you start thinking like, well, that's not exactly what I wanted, or I'm not sure. And it's
Mm,
usually internal. We don't say it out loud. The out loud part comes into that third phase, like that tension phase. And
mhm.
that's where we start voicing, I don't like this, or I want something different, or, it's such a huge topic, but like so many different areas that there could be issues with. And then eventually, good or bad, you get to the acceptance phase, which
Okay.
is everything is you know, understanding a person for who they are and accepting them for who they are. Or if it's, God forbid, super toxic,
Yeah.
that's the acceptance of this isn't healthy, this is bad.
Yeah.
And that's when sadly some people have to move forward.
Yeah. But have you noticed that some people may stay they stay in that honeymoon phase too long? And because a lot of times people don't want to face reality of things, and so people just go along to get along sometimes, so they stay in that honeymoon phase. Have you ever encountered people
Yeah,
just, being in
I
the
think
honeymoon
I think
phase
they
too
can.
long?
They would to stay in it too long. I mean, everyone loves that phase. I think more often than not, it doesn't last as long as people would like. And
Mhm.
once that feeling goes away, they think, oh, I'm not in love anymore.
Mm,
So to say, and I think that's what the trickling effects of I don't feel like this. So there's something lacking, there's something missing. And then people go down that rabbit hole of what's wrong. And that's where all those other phases go in. But to stay in it too long, I think the only way that people really stay in it too long is if they are kidding themselves, like if they just don't want to deal
right.
with reality, and then we'll just go into the avoidance of, no, it's all good.
Right, right.
Things need to be
Yep.
addressed. And if they addressed it earlier, probably wouldn't become an issue later. Probably.
And I'm finding that I don't know, for me, when I think about my relationship history, I wasn't a person who dated a lot.
Mhm.
Because I would say I was a little difficult in my younger years when it came to dating. I've been married 22 years now, but I can remember in my dating phase, guys saying that I was kind of difficult. I wasn't very trustworthy of people, so I don't know if I even got to the honeymoon phase in my. I think I kind of skipped that. Yeah, I liked someone, but I think I went through the trying to make sure that before I waste my time, are we a match? And I think that comes from, just life experiences, how you grew up, if
Mhm.
you're trusting of a relationship. So for me, I don't remember, I remember liking someone, but not really feeling I didn't feel the butterflies. I mean, real butterflies until I met my husband over 20 years ago. I'm being serious. I
Well,
didn't.
that's
So
fantastic. That's
yeah,
good.
I had
Um,
never been in love before until I met him.
mhm.
And so I didn't allow myself. I think some people don't even allow themselves to get to the honeymoon phase because they may be a little guarded. And so they may be right away. And I'm not saying that that's a good thing, because if you're not allowing yourself to enjoy the phase of getting to know someone, you're depriving
Yep.
yourself of a phase of
Yep.
the relationship. And so you go right to, challenging them and asking questions and just almost like for me, like weeding them out.
Yeah. It's
Let me
funny.
just
I've been experiencing that recently, um, with other people I've been talking to, and that's usually like the end. What you're describing, I see a lot when a relationship has ended, and usually
Mhm.
ended for negative reasons, for whatever they are. And then when they're going into the next person they're even speaking to, it's like rapid fire. I'm going to weed them out. I'm going to like, and people are just like, whoa, like this is, I was just trying to get to know you. I just want to have a conversation. And so it's almost like there's a jadedness to that.
Oh, wow.
Um,
That's a good word.
but
Yeah.
yeah, but it can definitely happen. I mean, believe it or not, I have had a few relationships now, but when I was younger, I didn't I didn't really go through a dating spree myself. until I
Mhm.
was in my 30s after my divorce. Like,
Okay.
that's when I really started dating what people would consider dating, like going out with this person, meeting this person. And I went through this, what I think most people consider like, oh, that's what you do in your like early 20s. And no, I was in a long-term relationship, and then I went into
Mm.
another long-term relationship.
Yeah.
And so I never dated around until I was in my 30s.
Okay.
So it was very different.
Yeah. And again, if you don't necessarily, I guess I didn't have a whole lot of experience with dating because, like I said, I was kind of a, you know, one strike you're out kind of girl. So I
Yeah.
didn't really hang around a lot in relationships, you know, if they weren't serving me well. It was a question. I'm having a menopausal moment, but there was something I wanted to address, but I'll get back to it. Um, but when you think about, you know, younger people who are dating,
Mhm.
what are some things would you advise them to pay attention to? Because back in the day, it was courting and it was dating. Here it
Right.
came back, intentional dating, right? Do you believe that young people, I find a lot of young people want to be in relationships. They're like, I want to be in a relationship, I want to be in love, I want to
Yes.
get married, and which is it's refreshing that, you know,
Mhm.
they want to be in relationships. But do you think they date intention? Today's dating is a lot different, like you talked about earlier, the texting, the DMs, and you
Mhm.
know, all of the above when it comes to
Right.
not interacting face to face. How would you categorize like dating then versus dating now?
Oh, that's a really good question. Yeah, the texting world, and I'll be honest, when it comes to younger people now, and I see this over and over and over again, I've I've worked with people, and in this office and out of the office,
Mhm.
this younger generation can have a full blown relationship. We're talking full on, 100% in. We're in love. We're getting married, and they've literally never met the person.
Yeah.
And but if you talk to them, it is very serious and very no different. And it's hard for someone of our age and our generation to go, how can you be in a relationship, with that, but that emotional connection is still there. So to go back to your initial question, like how is it different? I think people, good or bad, have formed an attachment to a device. You and I
Okay.
are conversing like this. We're having very personal conversations. We're
Right.
FaceTiming, we're looking at each other, which is one of the things that I always tell people when they're meeting them online. Have you FaceTime? It's one of the first things I ask when they're like, oh, have you FaceTime? Do you know who you're talking to?
It's
Make
true.
sure that you are talking to
Yeah.
who you think you're talking to.
Mhm.
Um, and if they don't want to FaceTime, huge red flag.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, like you said, that human connection is a lost art sometimes because people can hide behind the screen. They can be, you know, this made up person, you
yeah.
know, and not necessarily, you know, show up in terms of who they really are. And I really feel like people, I had someone tell me that for a good 3 months, you know, this was a male. They said for a good 3 months, they are a good boyfriend. But they say after that, they don't know where else to go with the relationship. And so that kind of tells me that, you know, yeah, you can, you know, put on the smile, the charm, and say all the right things. But then at some point, once you get past that, because it's easy to get in a relationship, but it's just the managing piece. And when you think about managing a relationship, what does that look like, Catherine? When you think of with any relationship, if we're trying to make it to the finish line, if we're trying to, let's say the finish line is marriage, if
Mhm.
we're trying to get there, what are some core things? What are some foundational things people should have?
That's a good question. One thing is friendship. I think people bypass that friendship when they think they're the person that they're connected with. It's that love, it's the sexual attraction.
Mhm.
It's like, oh, I'm really drawn to this person. They have these qualities. You know, it's a physical thing. And that always fades. It will always fade. It doesn't matter who you're with. It doesn't even matter if you were dating the hottest guy or girl on the planet. Like,
Yeah,
age, it will fade.
that's
So
right.
friendship and having fun, and that's what I mean by that friendship, having fun with the person that you were with and joking around
Mhm.
and being happy on that sense, that part, that side of the relationship, I think is huge and super important to have. Because if you don't have fun with that person, all of that other stuff is going to fade.
Yeah.
So that's I mean, we could talk a million years on communication.
Oh, wow.
And communication and expressing yourself and not holding things in. I think if the people are getting ready to get married, you need to look at, are your goals in alignment? You know,
Yes.
what kind of income do you get? And not that I'm going to be a millionaire, like realistically, what are your plans? What are your goals? What kind of house do you want to live in? Where do you want, are you someone that you want to have a huge house and all the money goes there? Or are you someone who, no, I'd rather have a smaller house, but I want to travel. You know, I want to have money so I can do things. You know, those are things that people never really think about or talk about until they're already in it.
Yeah.
And then it can become, you know, a point of conflict.
Oh, yeah. Do you want children?
Children. That's a given. Like, how many children?
How many children? I think sometimes people are so afraid of canceling that person out or being canceled out, because some people just really want to be in relationships. And so they feel like, you know, once I get married, you know, if I can change my mind on these things. And it's just like, show up as the person that who you show up as you are, you know, be authentic, be who you are. And you can't be afraid to lose people in the early part of dating. And I think you got to show up as the person that you are. And I think some people show up as, you know, what they say wolf in sheep clothing. Yeah. They show up differently because they're afraid of losing someone. But at some point, you know, the layers have to come off. And they often say, I think that a person should, I know within 6 months, some people say you can know if you want to be with the person or not. Within 6 months, you can decide if you want to be with the person or not. What do you think about that? Do you think it takes longer? It just depends on the person. What do you think about there?
That's another great question. As a whole, if someone said like in 6 months, you know, and we'll just go and get married. As a whole, I would say no way. Like you need to. Everyone puts on a good front for 6 months. Heck, I would say everyone can put on a good front for a year.
You think so?
Oh, I really do. 6 months is a good starting point, but from 6 months to a year, that's where you're going to start seeing. I think people lose a little bit of that honeymoon phase.
Yep,
they show who you are. I think when people show you who they are, you need to listen. You can't keep but in this scenario or back and people want to they're looking for that honeymoon phase. They keep going back to, well, when we had this conversation 3 months ago, this is what was said. When we first talked, we said that we were in alignment. So I think they're just going through a hard time, and we justify, you know, all of those things when when you need to move forward and you need to take a person for who they are. And that's that acceptance phase at the end. And I think sometimes people just don't want to get to that acceptance phase because we want to start over again. Like if you've invested all of this time, it's like, I don't want to. And this is even, you don't even have to be married, you know, but I've been with this person for so long. I don't want to start over.
Yeah.
And I mean, in some ways that's good. That will hold your marriage together as long as it's not destructive. You know, is it destructive to you? Is there destructive to other people? Are kids in the mix? I mean, there's so many scenarios surrounding that, but wanting to stay together, I do think is a good quality.
Yeah. But just laying that foundation earlier, taking the good with the bad. I mean, I guess, you know, we definitely got to define like, you know, was a deal breaker. I feel like sometimes people give up too soon, I think, because they don't have the necessary tools to sustain a relationship. Again, it's easy to get in a relationship, but the managing piece, which is so hard. And I often say it takes a full year. Like I said, Fred proposed to me after 2 years of dating. And I felt like that was the appropriate amount of time because in that 2 years, you go through things and you figure out, you know, how do you guys problem solve together? You know, are you forgiving? That's another thing that's very
I forgot about that one. Yes, forgiveness.
You gotta know how to, you know, forgive people and communicate effectively and respect your partner. And because men want to be respected, women want to be respected too. I was reading this book that talked about men want to be respected, women want to be loved. And so you got to ask yourself, am I respecting my partner? Am I loving my wife? Or, are we doing these things intentionally? And a lot of times people aren't intentionally showing up in a way to really sustain a relationship. There is a lot of things are emotional driven. That emotional can be triggered emotionally, and sometimes it dictates how they engage with one another. So got to be careful with that.
I feel like I have to go back just 1 second.
Yes.
Because as I was saying this, I could just hear my mom ringing in my ear. So when it comes to like, is 6 months long enough? My mom, this is back when I was in high school, she met her current husband, and it's been over 35 years. And they met on a spiritual connection and a love, a very, very deep love. And they were married in under a year, and they are still married today.
Wow. In under a year.
But they were both older, and they had both gone through relationships and marriages. They were at a different, I think the older you are, hopefully the quicker you can, siphon through some of those things. I think when people are younger and they just haven't lived life yet, that's where I would definitely say like 6 months. Not saying it's impossible. It would not be like, 6 months is long enough to go ahead and get married.
Yeah. You want to date, because I think dating is good because you learn what you want and what you don't want. Now, at first go around, if you find someone, hey, seal the deal. I believe in that. If you're ready to seal that deal. So it's like, it's no point of waiting. If you find somebody, if you don't have to kiss a whole bunch of frogs, hey, go for it. So, but I want to present something to you. Okay. And this is kind of like the basis of, the discussion and how would you handle this. I went to go see this movie. And so for people who have not seen this movie, it's not going to be a spoiler alert or anything like that, but I'm just going to tell you what this movie was about. So it's called The Drama, and Zendaya was in it, right? So she meets I think the guy from Twilight. He was one of the main characters in Twilight.
Is this in the theaters now, or is this?
It's in theaters now.
I haven't even seen it. Okay, go ahead. Tell me.
So what ended up happening is she was with him and two other friends. So they were going around the table saying, what was the worst thing you've done when you were a teenager? Right? So the first person said, when I was younger, I was playing hide and seek with this, disabled, mentally, a child who had not mental illness, but who had some mental disability. I locked them in the closet, and there was this whole community search for him. She said, I knew where he was, but I didn't tell anybody. So finally, they did find that he was caught, but it was 24 hours. Again, he was mentally challenged, so he didn't know to come out of the closet, but she locked him in there. So whole search, whatever. Okay, so that was bad. So then another friend said that he was dating this girl, and a dog went to chasing them. And he took the girl that he was dating, and he used her as a shield to keep from getting bitten by the dog. Actually, that was the first person, right? So he said that. So he said that first. So then the second one was locked in the closet. Then the third person said, I used to be a cyber bully. I used to bully people a lot. So when it came down to Zendaya, which is her name was Emma, she said, when I was 15, I planned a mass shooting at a school. They paused. A mass shooting. She says, yes, I was being bullied. She wasn't being severely bullied, but she was being bullied. So she was engaged to one of the guys, to the Twilight guy. Okay. She planned a mass shooting. She went through all that she was doing to plan for it, because there was two girls that she was looking to get. So as she was planning this mass shooting, she was, something derailed her plan, for, so make a long story short. But she pretty much kind of outlined, and she had some detailed outline how she was going to do it. But plans got derailed. She didn't do it. But at 15 years old, that was her plan. So they were all like 25 years old. Okay. So they all paused. They were like, are you serious? And we really thought she was going to say, Just kidding. No. So the guy that she was going to marry, everybody else was, the friend group, they kind of like dismantled. They was very upset with her. Like, I can't believe that you would do that. There's something wrong with you. But again, it was 10 years ago because she's 25 now. So he had to really consider, like, do I marry this person? Like, what do you do in a situation like that where you've been dating someone a year or two? That's never come up. They share something very disturbing. Right now, they're good people. Like,
Right.
how do you manage such information if you're in a dating relationship? How do you manage such information? What do you do? Do you still marry that person? I'm not going to give it away whether or not he married her or not.
Right.
But it broke up the friend group because they were devastated. Because again, it got progressively worse. They were devastated that
Okay.
she planned it. She had the gun, she had the people, she was taken out, all of it. And she wasn't even severely, but not to say that being severely bullied required,
Right.
justify
Yeah. That's wow.
all.
Okay.
But what do you do, when you don't know somebody? And it doesn't even have to be something that drastic, but before you get married to somebody, like I said, we don't necessarily ask the right questions, right? But I guess it was like 2 weeks before her wedding. Like, what do you do in a situation when you just learned something about somebody? Do you continue that relationship? How do you manage that?
Okay. Well, I'm thinking that's a big. That's not just like a little.
That's not. That's big.
That's not a little. That's a holy smokes. That's throwing in the element of danger. Yeah, a lot of things. So, I mean, I can't say that right from the get to say like, oh, end the relationship, because at that point that would have been 10 years ago. I
Yeah.
think privately, maybe not in the group, you would have to, and I'm sure there's other things less severe than that. But you would have to talk to them individually, like what's happened with them in the past 10 years. Why did they stop? Why didn't, if this attack, why didn't they replan the attack? Why didn't they go, was it an impulse thing that once, for whatever reason, I haven't seen this movie, but for whatever reason, when it was turned upside down and she couldn't go through with it, I mean, couldn't she have like redone it again? I mean, she's in the school. Like, was there other things? Like, I think there's step one would be to ask a lot more questions. And how did you get past that situation? Find out to make sure that they were past that situation. And how did they get past that situation? And I know that's obviously, it's a movie, it's an extreme example, but there
Just
might
in general, though.
yeah.
I mean,
But realistic ones, people talk about like, well, I've been a chronic cheater. And maybe you never done, and all of a sudden it comes out in a group conversation. They're like, well, yeah, I've actually cheated on every person I've ever been with.
mhm.
And you didn't know that. It's never really been a discussion because they seemingly have always been faithful to you. And so you've never questioned it. But that's again, well, why did you? What happened? When was the last time? Am I the first person that you've never cheated on? And if they say yes, I think there's a lot more questions that have to
Yeah.
be delved into.
Yeah.
before
And it
you-
goes back to our title, Love Isn't Enough.
yeah,
It's just not enough, because you look at, and like I said, it doesn't have to be anything that drastic, but it could be infidelity. It could be, I spent some time incarcerated. Can you, or you're in the relationship, the person doesn't know how to communicate well. They're fine. They're not good with their finances. They've had a few bankruptcies. They have it's varying things, right?
Yeah,
And I think, and I brought up that because it makes you pause for a minute. Are we asking people the right questions? Not so much to cancel them out, but are we asking the right questions? And when we ask those questions, if we say we love somebody, are we prepared to look for some solutions? And I think that doesn't always happen. There aren't really any workable solutions. People are very quick to throw in the towel and give up, and not really try to, how can we salvage this relationship, as opposed to just ending things. And I get there are times where you do have to end relationships, but yeah.
No, I mean that's very valid. And I think the first thing, it's always going to come back to communication. Again, you have to You have to talk, you have to ask,
Mhm.
you have to ask the question. So if you're with someone and whatever it is you find something out that is disturbing to you,
Mhm.
you need to be able to ask and ask directly.
Mhm.
If that person gets angry and shuts down and avoids and refuses to talk about something, that's a red flag.
That is.
That
Yeah.
that it is a red flag, and that's not something to just to dismiss. Well, he
Yeah.
loves me, and we'll work through it, and that's where people start making excuses.
Yeah.
Um,
Transparency is important. I think especially if you're going to marry someone, transparency is important. And let's kind of move forward a little bit. When you think about in a relationship, you're going to, experience some challenges, right? What does healthy conflict look like? What is a healthy argument? What are some do's and don'ts when it comes to, having arguments with someone? Because sometimes people can hit below the belt. And I
yes,
think if you're in the habit of when you get upset, you're calling people out of their names and stuff
that
like that.
was that was gonna be my number one.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah,
So what are some healthy ways? What are some don'ts when it comes to arguing with your partner?
the big don't, and I honestly can say of like with everything I've gone through in different relationships, I've never been that person, nor have I been with a person that was mother effing a person up and down and calling them the B and do it like that does not if it I think it's because you set that standard very early on. If that was the relationship, that would end it quick. Like that's a me personal thing. So I would
Mhm,
say calling someone out their name is a huge no-no.
mhm.
Now, I will say that's something that would never fly with me, but I have worked with people, believe it or not, that they do fight like that. And though I always advise against it, and that's all the different ways you're supposed to communicate, we'll talk about in a second. But you have to make sure not to put like what's good for me onto someone else. Some people do it, and if they're both of the and backgrounds have a lot to do with this. So if they both come from families where it was very volatile yelling, and they can hear those things and like, well, that's just in the heat of the moment, and they roll it off like, well, I didn't really mean that. And there are some, very few by the way, but there I have worked with a couple that even though they're mad in the moment, they're like, yeah, I know they didn't mean it and I didn't mean it either. And so, that's just the way we argue. I'm like, okay, well, I can't support that, but
Mm.
that's not what's going to tear them apart. But for a lot of people, most people, um, calling someone the B, calling like you talked about with men and respect, that's huge. Men want to be respected, but so do women. So when
Absolutely.
you get nasty, then you're not talking about an issue anymore. Now you're doing personal attacks.
Mhm.
Like whatever the problem was that brought this argument up, if I'm going at you personally and just calling you a B or whatever it is, that's not what we were talking about. That's not the fight. Now you're just trying to degrade. You're trying to put someone down. You're trying to make them less. You're trying to shrink them. And
Yeah.
that's never okay.
Yeah. So it's like attack the problem and not the person. And I think
Yeah.
that's what a lot of people do. So what do we want to do when it comes to
Um,
having a healthy argument?
I think first is identify the problem. Identify what it is that you're really fighting about. Not
Right.
things are letting, every time anyone in a long-term relationship, you let things build up, you don't talk about it, and then all of a sudden you're fighting over like who didn't pop the popcorn that night, and then all of a sudden it's like World War III,
Yeah.
and we all know it's not about the popcorn. It has to do with, everything else that was leading up to that moment. So I think taking a step back, and if you are those people that are very explosive or just they don't even have to be that bad, but get very hot-headed,
Mhm.
take a step back, agree that 5 minutes, 10 minutes is okay. You don't have to go at it right there in the moment. And that's very
Yeah.
hard for some people. Some people, like, you have this that idealize of like the tortoise and the hare, and the hare is the one that's always like, we got to deal with it right now, and the tortoise is like, they kind of like roll into their shell and they don't want to talk and they want to process. And if you have that mix
Oh,
of
that is good.
personality,
That's good.
it gets very difficult. But then you got to work on, like, the tortoise is going to have to stick their head out, and the hare is going to need to learn to take a pause, halfway through the race and rest, while that tortoise is catching up. And
That's
so
good.
that's a different scenario. But as a whole, find out what the problem is, and it's almost never about that top argument. It's the things that you've been holding in, the little
That 90%, right?
That's
It's that 90%.
It's behind the 90, and it's all that behind the 90 that led to that moment. And knowing that 90 of your partner is huge.
Yes.
Not just your 90. I mean, and actually, I will say this: knowing your 90 is very, very important. So you understand why you're reacting, why you're still seeking out the same negative partner. And and stop justifying, like, well, I did this, I asked the questions, I did all these things, and that's not always enough. Like, who am I? What am I doing? Why am I allowing? If you are in similar patterns, why do I keep allowing this pattern back into my life? And sometimes people can fool you, like that initial thing we talked about. They can fool you, but this is when I would go back to, when they show you who you are or who they are. Listen. I think Maya Angelou said that first.
Yes, she did.
When she was one of the first person that I remember.
Yeah, she did.
She was that, and it was
Maya Angelou. Yeah,
brilliant woman, but brilliant statement. When people show you who they are,
believe them.
Believe them. That's what it was. Believe them.
Believe them. You're absolutely right. Defensiveness is another thing I think what I find, the couples that I counsel, there's a lot of defensive behavior, not owning it, right? Once you identify the problem, there's always a guiltier, or maybe equally guilty, a guiltier party. And it's like, when people are so defensive, you can't necessarily change it, right? If you don't acknowledge that there's a problem, you can't change it. You're just defending it, avoiding it, denying it. It is just like, you really can't get to a solution if you don't accept responsibility. And no one can accept responsibility. It's like, it's so painful sometimes for people to accept responsibilities for their wrongdoing. It's just like, this can be over a lot quicker if you accept responsibility. Now you can move toward changing behavior. But if you don't, accept responsibility, there's no change behavior. Because what they say in AA, the first order of business is acknowledgement in a relationship. I'm a poor communicator, or whatever that acknowledgement is. You got a lot of defensive behavior.
Very true. That is very true.
Yeah. So I would say people attack the problem and not the person. And I like the tortoise and the hare. I like that example.
Sometimes those hares need to, like, get the, say, go take it. You're halfway through the race. It's like a marathon where they're like getting their drinks of water on the side. Like, go get the cup, get a drink of water. Let the other slow people work up to you. They're coming. Patient.
Right. And listen, I think, do you find, when you are just engaging in any relationships, just the art of listening, I feel like it's sometimes a lost art. People are listening to reply as opposed to listening to understand people. And I think it's so important to listen to people.
And I think, like, I was being very cautious of not to, like, overtalk you. There's times where, like, I know that I do that, and it's because a thought comes into my head. I know. and I'll spit it out, and I'm like, oh no, I didn't want to forget. And so people do that naturally. But when you're arguing with someone, there's a difference between, like, you're interrupting because, like, something's heavy on your heart and you're just trying to get it out, versus I'm going to be quiet and listen to you. But you can sometimes, I mean, it seems like for some people, I can see it in their eyes. Like, you're not listening. You are calculating, because some people are very calculating. They are calculating in their head of, I'm making counter arguments. I'm not listening. It's like you're on a debate. I'm making my counter argument. So I'm waiting for you to close your mouth so I can jump in and tell you all the reasons it's the opposite of what you just said.
Yeah.
That's really hard to deal with.
Oh, that is. And I think we all can be guilty of that. Just especially when we in that defensive mode, it's just like I have to constantly tell myself if I'm having a disagreement with my husband to actively listen.
Yeah, just listen.
Just listen.
I've done the same thing. I'm not married now, but I've been with the person for like 12 or 13 years.
Yeah,
And
you hadn't been together that long?
I know. Yeah, and I have been.
Wow.
And it's one of those things where, yeah, I mean, when you're with someone for so long, you get into like, oh, I know this person. Like, I know what they're going to say. And that is one of the things that I know he's like, stop telling me what I'm thinking. Like, you don't always know. And, in my mind, I'm like, yeah, I do. But when he says that, it doesn't matter if I think I know what he's thinking or not. That's telling me that I'm not listening. I need to take a step back and go, okay, just hear him, and vice versa. And he does the same thing. But like, if someone says that to you, so for anyone listening to this, if someone says that to you, just take a step back and go, okay, just lay everything off the table. Just listen, because something's, whether it's true or not, they just want to be heard, and they're getting irritated because you're not hearing them. So
oh my God. Yeah.
hear them.
Yeah. Because people want to be understood.
Yeah.
So if you listen, I think, and especially if you're sending a message, you got to make sure you're not being abusive in your language, because that will shut someone down. When you think about the receiver, the person who's on the receiving end of that conversation, you got to be mindful of what you're saying to that person, or because they'll shut down and they won't hear you. So make sure that, I always tell couples, no blaming, shaming, finding fault, making someone feel guilty, because once you start you
right,
shut down, it's just like, and you got to be intentional. I mean, again, I'm not perfect. Like I said, I know I don't always, I try to follow the advice that I give, but sometimes I have a bad day and I have to go back. But when you do have a bad day, you got to go back and apologize.
Yes.
I need a do-over. I said that completely wrong. I am so sorry.
That's the acknowledgement part. It's taking accountability, which I think we lack a lot. It's just in general in our society today. It's just lack of accountability.
Yes.
And being accountable for yourself, and to be okay with. And well, I will say this. I think a lot of this has to do with your partner, because there are some partners that once you say, you come to them and say, hey, I misspoke. I shouldn't have said it like that. If you're with the type of person that's going to take that and run with it, like now they've got you and they're like, see, this is what you always do. And then they just go at you. That's obviously not the communication, and it will pull the person back from being accountable, because now I'm going to be in a position to never say that I was wrong.
Yep.
Because they're going to hold this over my head for like the next 3 months. Anytime anything is brought up, they're bringing back up this
point
when I said I was wrong. And and that's damaging. And
oh my gosh.
You're never going to move forward.
You got to create a space where people can be vulnerable and say what they need to say. Well, like you said, without it being thrown back up in their face. It's just like, and then that just shuts people down. Catherine, as we kind of come to a close, when you think about mental illness, people who are in relationships and are not, they have mental illness and it goes untreated. Like, how damaging is that if you have a partner who may have some personality disorders, mood disorders? Like, how damaging is that to a relationship?
When
it goes untreated?
If people are refusing to get help for something, well, depending on the mental illness, obviously, but it could be, it's the end. It could be very much the end, unless you are just living with someone that is okay. If we're talking about marriage, there are some people that, because they don't want to start over, doesn't necessarily mean they're happy, but they're just okay with kind of leading a separate life, and you do you, I do me, and we're just kind of sharing bills, or we get into a routine. But if you have one person that's trying to fix this, or trying to move forward, or trying to make things better, and the other one either refuses to acknowledge anything or doesn't want to, like, it's good enough for me. I don't really care.
Right.
It's going to be the end. That right there will be the beginning of the end.
Right. Because it's not a problem for someone to have mental illness in a relationship, but it's the untreated, like what I'm hearing you say, it's the untreated mental illness that causes the problem. Yeah.
I think most people, if you truly love someone and are in love, and not the in love part will fade, but like love them as a human being, love them as their soul.
Hmm.
Um, you want them, you want good for them. And if someone is actively seeking help and actively seeking to be better, unless I know I have worked with some people, their mental illness is
Yeah.
abusive. It ends up coming abusive to the partner. Then I'm not saying stay, stick it out, work them through it, because you can't be on the opposite end of that abuse. But if they are refusing to be treated,
Hmm.
it's going to be the beginning of the end. But if you have someone who's like, they suffer with depression, well, now they're talking to someone. Now they're finding skills to work through that. Now you're with someone, a partner that understands, that says, hey, are you having a rough day? Is there anything I can do to help you in this moment?
Hmm.
That is huge as far as letting that relationship flourish and move forward. And it doesn't mean every day is going to be perfect, but you move forward with an understanding that it's not always going to be perfect, but I'm here to help, if I can. And maybe sometimes that help is like that person just expressing, you know what, I need a little downtime. I need tonight. I need to be in the room. And again, it takes a lot from both sides. You have to have someone who wants to work with that, and support it.
Yeah.
But if you have that, then a mental illness in and of itself does not mean it's going to destroy a relationship. But
That's
that
right.
person has to, number one, take accountability that they do have this mental illness, and true accountability. I want to throw this out there because there's some other stuff. If they don't take accountability, and it's just like, well, that's just me, that's just the way I am,
Yeah.
that's not accountability. Using a diagnosis as an excuse is not accountability. That's not bettering yourself. That's not bettering the people around you. And it is not going to maintain a relationship. Now you're just using an excuse to be abusive or awful to someone else. And that's not true accountability. That's excuses.
Yeah, yeah, I like that. Like you said, that accountability is so important because, again, go back to you can't change what you don't acknowledge. It's
Yeah.
just like people will use that excuse, but I'm sick, I'm
Yeah.
depressed, I'm anxious, but we still have a responsibility to take care of ourselves, especially if you're bringing someone into the fold. If you are in a relationship, I think it's so important.
And if you have kids involved in these
Oh, yeah,
situations, it
yeah,
breaks
that's
my heart.
huge. Yeah, that's huge. What's some, as we come to a close, what would be some final things when you think about just really um, encouraging people to work through their challenges? Like, what are some things that some final lasting words you would want to impart to someone watching tonight? What would you say on
As
how
far
to
as
make?
how to maintain is number one. Everyone's going to say this. It's communication.
Hmm.
It's expressing what it is that you're feeling without apology, and
Hmm.
very straightforward. Just expressing what it is that you're going through, what
Hmm.
you're seeing, what you're feeling, and then listening with that same full heart.
Yeah,
Letting the person respond, because I think sometimes just because you're feeling something doesn't mean it's always real.
yeah, it's very
And
true.
I think that's something that we just have to be mindful of. Like,
Hmm.
feelings can change, and feelings most often will change.
Hmm.
But more than anything else, you have to stick to your core values. And if you are living your life to your values, the feelings will coincide with that.
That's
And they'll
good.
come in it.
That's good. Don't give up so quick, people. It's just like fight it, fight, fight. If a relationship is worth fighting for, I often say, just take a critical look at critique yourself, because the only person you can change is self. And so I always encourage people, when people are doing this right here, pointing the fingers, like it's you, it's you, it's you. It's just like,
Oh, absolutely. And I don't want to be a hypocrite. I've been divorced,
mm-hmm,
and it's
mm-hmm,
not easy. And I think even more so, people think like, oh, you work with relationships, you've been divorced. And I said, yeah, that's exactly why I know the feelings, I understand it. And then people assume that I would just push people to get divorced. And I'm like, oh, no, no, no. I'm like,
Mm,
you have to make sure that we've gone through all of these things before
mhm.
you just throw in the towel. There's so many, and it starts with communication. And I
Yeah,
will say, like, it's the lack of communication um, that will end a marriage.
yeah. Laying that foundation for communication, because without it, you can't get anywhere. And I think sometimes, Catherine, people say, "Well, I communicate, but is your communication healthy?"
Yes,
You're
yes, it's
saying
true.
some stuff, but is it healthy communication?
Right.
I
Yeah.
think we all have to ask ourselves that question. And again, we're not going to be perfect. We're going to have to do over. We're going to have to say, "I apologize." But the reality is, if you continue that, if there's a pattern of you misusing your communication, at some point, a person is like, "I'm done.
Yeah.
I'm done," because you can't keep saying, "I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I missed it. I missed it. I missed it." At some point, you got a purpose in your heart and in your mind to get it right.
Yeah.
Not perfect, but
Per-
right.
yes.
Yeah. So,
Really.
Katie, how can people get in contact with you?
Well, they could call this wonderful office, and I should say I've been working here's the office. Uh,
Right.
you
Yes,
know,
I
Nika Owens and Associates. You can look up the website, Nika, or let's say it's owens-therapy.com, and
mhm.
you'll see not only me, you'll see a multitude of therapists that you could work with. And I can honestly say that this is, I've never thought about leaving because the people I work with are so amazing. And that is
Oh,
actually saying a lot to you, Nika, because
oh,
you were the first person that I really went to post leaving the school system and moving into private practice. And that was back in 2013, 14.
yeah.
And that
Mhm.
was, you were such a wonderful, loving
Well, thank you, Kat.
push into, becoming the therapist, helping me become who I am today. So I
Oh,
really,
thanks, Catherine. And I consider you a friend, a colleague, and I enjoy having you there. Your wittiness, your intelligence, you're just the simplistic and also the complexity of which I mean the information that you carry and you know, give to your clients. And so I appreciate the level of um, knowledge that you have and that you impart to your clients. So we love having you, and it's just you're a blast. You're a blast. I like
feel the
you.
same way about you.
Well, thank you, Catherine. So thank you so much, Catherine. You can just hold on as we end the live, but don't hang up just yet. But I'm just going to end it. But just hold on for just a moment, okay?
No problem. Still looking.